right? Um, is what you can use here as well. And you can also source safety and grounding from your environment, if it's a safe environment, right? From nature, from having your feet on the earth in some way, or just feeling your feet wherever you are, feeling your feet like right now, if you put them on the floor, even if you are on the sofa, setting crisscross applesauce. I'm also a mom, even though she's 13, still a mom. Um, However you're setting, tap into a part of your body that you can feel, um, and anchor into that feeling of safety. Sometimes if we have challenges like chronic pain or any kind of health issue, if we have, like mental health sensitivities, depression, anxiety, anything that helps us not feel our best, right? And if you're chronically not feeling your best, sometimes tapping into safety can feel challenging. But one of the things to remember is you don't need to feel safety throughout your entire being. You can tap into safety that you feel in a single part of your body, in your hand, in your toes, in your ears, right? You can simply choose to feel safety in this moment, even if you don't quite feel it. Choosing to be open to feeling it is going to set you up for being open to receiving it. Just the intention that you place on the desire to feel safe is going to bring it into your awareness more so. Sometimes, when I was younger and my daughter was younger, and I was working through healing post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. You might also hear me refer to it as complex PTSD, and we'll go into the differences for those. But when I was feeling like a hot mess express, I would often carry a small object in my pocket or my bra. Oftentimes, it was like a hair barrette of hers or some kind of little trinket that she had given me, a little rock or something, because whenever I felt that small item, right, it would anchor me to the love that I felt for her. And it was the reminder of like, I'm on this wellness journey, this recovery journey from trauma so that I can be the best mom that I possibly can be to her. And over time, it became so I can be the best version of myself, for the people that I, lead and support, for my clients. But in the beginning, having something to anchor onto, holding something really was helpful. And so lots of things can help you to bring in safety. There are smells, if you can smell things, so, like incense or essential oils can help you begin to train your mind and your body and your brain that when I smell these types of scents, I know that I'm safe, right? Having a physical thing can also help. You can get a favorite blanket to help just bring in safety. Also, a yoga mat. You don't have to do yoga, right? It is helpful, but you don't have to. Years ago, simply laying on my yoga mat wrapped in a blanket became like a safe place that I could actually create and anchor into when I was going through like this deep healing experience of my own trauma. I would lay on that yoga mat for like at least 5 minutes every single day, wrapped in a blanket, like a little sushi roll, right? And just allow the feelings, the pain, the grief, the trauma just to like move through my body. But I could tap into this place of safety because I didn't feel it like inside of me. I was relying on my faith to really tap into that. But the physical touch points can really be helpful. So we'll go over more of those, but those are just some quick ones that you can implement right away or share with your kids, with your loved ones, with your students. There's all kinds of things that can help. We will also go over um, tips and tricks for like creating a coping skills like box where you can have some of these things on hand as you move through. And so when we think about personal awareness, we are often thinking about there's different kinds of awareness. When we allow ourselves to just tune in to what we feel in our heart, in our gut, like in our bones, there's like a truth that goes beyond how you feel, it goes beyond what you think, it goes beyond your personality, it goes beyond even like beliefs that you were born with. It's like this eternal truth. Like truth recognizes truth always, even if we don't agree with it, even if we wish it were different. You know when you have tapped into truth, you know it, you can feel it. And so when we are thinking about increasing self-awareness, what we're really saying is, how can I tune in to my higher self, right? To this eternal part of myself that knows the way, that knows the truth, that knows the light in any situation that I'm in. Sometimes when we've experienced trauma, our intuition sometimes can make us doubt, like, is this intuition or is this trauma? Is this intuition or is this fear? One of the ways to really know which is which is when you begin to tune in to your personal awareness more consistently through meditation, through simply getting still, right? Some people hate meditation. That's okay. There's some different ones that you can try and listen to. I can share some with you. Some have cuss words, some have only like nature sounds, some are guided, or you can just listen to um, the words and follow along with the words. And yeah, I have to think about anything else other than that. Meditation is simply silencing the thoughts in your mind and allowing just the presence of the now awareness to be here. Some people say that prayer is us talking to God, to our higher power, and that meditation is us listening to God, to a higher power. So we quiet our mind of thoughts and we simply listen to what comes through. And sometimes it's simply silent. That's 100% okay. The more that you cultivate that connection, the stronger it becomes, and the more you're able to trust it, because you'll be able to decide between, is this fear or is this knowing? Is this intuition or is this doubt kind of dressed up as intuition. You begin to discern between those differences. And sometimes those differences can be subtle. They can be subtle. So cultivating self-awareness is listening to your inner truth. It's cultivating time in the silence. And for some of us, silence is hard. For many of us who've had trauma, we can be triggered by too much silence, and by too much, just like um, of being in the abyss. That's perfectly okay. You can start where you are. You can listen to like background noise if it's nature, if it's there's all kinds of like sound machine type noises. So I love, I think it's called brown noise, but there's pink noise, there's white noise, there's probably every color in the rainbow kind of noise, and each one is a little bit different. You'll find the one that resonates best for your hearing, for your brain. You'll feel it. If it brings you peace or calm in your system, that's how you know it's for you. If it doesn't, that might not be the one for you. And some of these types of sound, like brown noise, pink noise, they all have a different texture to them, if you will. Some are great for calming quickly, some are great for focus, some are great for like if you're in a more hyper arousal. So it's if your nervous system is outside of the window of tolerance, and we're going to go through what all of these things mean. But think about window of tolerance as like your safe zone where you feel in the middle, you feel like I'm okay. Everything feels okay. Might not be perfect, but I feel okay. I feel stable. I feel good. Life is okay, all is well in this moment. When we start to climb above that into hyper arousal, we start to move into fight or flight trauma response. So, where we have to get out of here, we have to fight back, we have to make a decision quickly. We're usually in panic and reaction. We're not thinking things through clearly. We're not responding to what's happening in truth. We're reacting. So when we dive deeper into self-awareness, right, we start to be able to notice that we have control between the action that happens and our response to it. The space between the action that happens and our reaction to it, this pause, this is where our power lies. Our power lies in the present moment when we're able to um, really lean into what is happening, what has happened, what are just the facts of what happened. Not what I think about it, not what I feel about it, not what I feel should have happened, not what I think they should have did or said or believed or how I think they should have treated me, right? All of those are valid questions. But when we start thinking about self-awareness, we are looking at what are the facts and then how do I feel about those facts if I don't allow myself to go into a story about it. So, for example, if someone cuts you off, you're driving, someone cuts you off, that's a fact. They cut you off, they didn't put their signal on, they weren't paying attention, whatever led to it, the fact was they cut you off, and it wasn't necessarily like a safe decision. They cut you off, a fact. How you feel about it could have been, you know, they weren't paying attention, they shouldn't be driving, maybe they're too old to be driving, maybe they were in a rush and being inconsiderate. We can have a whole list of reasons why we think something happened, but if the fact of the matter is someone cut me off, okay, we pause, take a breath, bring in some regulation to your own nervous system, which simply means you calm yourself down to a moment where you have control over what you do next. We often lose control between what happened and what we do next because we don't pause. We can get so in our feelings, in our head, we can get so amped up that we simply act. We don't think, we just act. So, if we're using this example, someone cuts us off, that's the fact. There's how we feel about it, and there's what we're going to decide to do next. Oftentimes, many of us are trying to lean toward this idea of not sweating the small stuff. So, we might get upset. We might call that person a jerk. We might even honk at them, right? Maybe. But many of us might decide to move past it to realize if they're acting that kind of a way, they're probably not having the best day or they may not be in the best like position in life or in this day, let's just let it go, right? Oftentimes, if we're not able to check our own self and say, how much time and energy do I want to put into this thing that could just be a fleeting moment if I allow it to be, right? Now we're talking really emotional intelligence, which is what comes with healing our trauma and moving even beyond healing into who do I want to be as a person? How do I want to act? How do I want to show up? What do I want to embody for myself as a person? What do I stand for? What's the standard that I set for myself? Right? So when we lean into that, we begin to look at there's the facts of what happened, there's us pausing thinking about how we want to respond. and then making a choice of what we're going to do next. I tell my daughter all the time, it's not that we don't get upset as adults. We get pissed off, we get upset. There's things that happen that shouldn't happen. And there are times, right, where you want to take your vehicle and run that person right over. There's times where you want to just hit them and say, look, I've got great insurance. Don't mess with me. Once you get a certain age, maybe over 40, right, you start to think, like, I'm not here for this today. And if we pause, I've had to pause many a times and say, I don't want to go to jail today. So, though this person pissed me off, and no, I have every right to, you know, do something unkind if I wanted to, I would feel justified in doing it. Is that who I stand for as a person? My level of awareness has been cultivated enough to say, for me personally, if some of my values and some of my chosen beliefs, and we'll go more over this, beliefs that you choose for yourself around who you want to be, I have decided that I am an extraordinary wife, an extraordinary mom, an extraordinary therapist and CEO, and coach, right? And so if I'm focusing on extraordinary leadership, someone who is being an extraordinary leader is not going to plow someone over with their vehicle because they got upset, because they cut them off, right? So that action would not align with the identity that I have chosen for myself. So when we think about self-awareness, we're looking at what are the standards, what are the patterns, the habits that I'm allowing or that I've set up for myself that are supporting me, that are leading me where I want to be, or that they're not leading me where I want to be, and I might not be so aware of them. One of the biggest things, and you all might be interested in this, I've had it on my heart to teach a course. It's going to happen in the next maybe 2 months or so around how not to be toxic. And I say that because so often we are calling everybody else the problem, and sometimes they are. Sometimes they are the problem. But oftentimes, everywhere we go, that's where we are. We are with us 24/7, 365, literally for 100 years if we're blessed enough, right? To live that long. So, self-awareness also comes down to owning our own stuff, our own shadow, our own um, idiosyncrasies, our own toxic traits and habits, right? The things that we bring to a situation that are not helpful. And that if we're honest, we need to commit to working on improving. But all of this starts with self awareness. If we aren't looking at ourselves and we're always pointing the finger at somebody else, right? Even if somebody else is responsible for part of the problem, that very well might be true. We only actually have control over ourselves. We can't even control our children when they're minors per se, right? And they need us for food, water, shelter, love, all the things. There's even only an extent to how much we can control them, especially as they get older, right? We learn that in truth, love and even parenting isn't about control. It's about helping guide someone to say, I want to be this kind of person for myself. I want to make good choices because I want to feel proud of myself. I want my parents to be proud of me. I want to feel good about how I'm living and how I'm moving. When I'm moving crazy, when I'm doing things I know I shouldn't be doing, I don't feel good about those things. I don't feel good about myself. I'm going to get in trouble. That brings all this stress to it, right? We want to teach ourselves, our children, even our inner children to make good, healthy decisions because it's leading them towards the person they want to be versus away from who they want to be into chaos, destruction, darkness, negative consequences, jail, losing money, losing their reputation, like all those things. So even in that, it really isn't about necessarily just control. It's about helping to teach our children, ourselves, those that we have influence over, how to think, how to make good decisions, how to set some boundaries and standards and values for themselves so that they are making choices that they feel proud of. That still comes down to self-awareness. When we think about our own internal self-awareness, we also want to I have a timer that I'm checking to make sure I'm not going over it so much. When we think about self-awareness, we're also really wanting to think about, am I being aware of myself enough to know when something feels good for me and when it doesn't? And am I cultivating space in my nervous system so that if something is not feeling good for me, I know that I can pause and do some reflection, whether that's with myself, within a journal, whether it's talking to someone that I trust to give me solid advice or support, right? If it's working with a therapist or trauma informed coach, if it's going to a 12-step meeting, a support group meeting, right? Having spaces in our life where we can go and get support. It might be reading a spiritual text that you find support in. It might be the Bible, it might be a devotional, or other sacred text, but finding some kind of wisdom, a point of wisdom that can help us look at what was my part in this situation? How did I respond to this? How did I show up to this? What energy did I bring to the situation that either was helpful or not so helpful? Or maybe a little bit of both. Maybe it was valid in some ways, but it was also problematic in others. When we start to reflect and ask ourselves a better quality question, we're going to get feedback into how aware are we and to how unaware are we, right? I would even say how connected we are to ourself, our inner self, um, our highest self, and how much are we in disconnection. Whenever we're disconnected from ourself, from love, from God, we're going to be in fear. That's how we know. Whenever you're more connected, you're going to be able to tap into love and that sense of safety more easily and more consistently to the point where it becomes habit. And we'll talk more about that as we go. That's self awareness. And we've even touched on some of the um, nervous system regulation tools in terms of using your breath, using um, soothing techniques, meditation, breath, moving your body, dancing. There's different breathing techniques that we'll talk about. There's a 4-7-8 breath pattern that you can find just on YouTube, right? For some of us that have PTSD or complex PTSD, focusing on too many things at once sometimes can be overstimulating. Same thing if you have any kind of neurodivergence, PTSD, autism, anything like that. I personally do the 4-4-4 breath. So it's like the 4-7-8, but I do rounds of four. Breathe in for four, hold for four, count to four, and then you breathe out for four. So you breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4. You'd hold the breath for 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you breathe out to the count of 1, 2, 3, 4. You can truly make it however you want to make it 2 and 2, 4 and 4, 8 and 8. However, you want to do it is perfect. Pick your number. It's the act of doing it that calms the brain, the mind, the vagus nerve, and the nervous system. And we will go over many more strategies for that. But if you look up nervous system regulation tools, there are many. I would love for you to share some of the ones that you like and that you find in the discussion group so we can build like a resource list for each other. I have additional ones that I'll drop into for us. So that's that. Then we are moving on to really understanding the complexity of trauma, PTSD, and complex PTSD. So PTSD is just post-traumatic stress disorder, and it occurs when there's a trauma that happens and it's it's not worked through, right? meaning we don't process it, we don't complete the process of this trauma that's happened. It's like it gets stuck. So imagine being if someone scares you, you weren't expecting them, or somebody surprises you and comes around the corner and you weren't expecting them. That feeling of like fright, and being taken off guard and feeling like your heart kind of stop, and you feel this flood of like adrenaline, or even fear. Imagine that happening and then someone taking a remote control or a smartphone and pressing pause on that scene. So you're in this heightened state of fear, reaction, hyper arousal. So you are just like adrenaline's going, you feel scared, you feel panicked, and then someone presses a mute button, a pause button, and you're paused in that. When trauma happens, if we're not able to work through it, mind, body, and spirit, and allow that energy to move through our bodies, we get stuck in this state of panic or fear or frozen, right? Or fight or flight. We get trapped in that energy, and it's like a button is hit and pause happens. And so when that occurs, when it lasts over time, over 3 months typically, right? We can go into post-traumatic stress, right? So the original stressor happened, it's not resolved, so we're just, like, holding it still. Once we begin to hold it for longer than some months, right, with no resolution, it can turn into post-traumatic stress disorder because our body then takes on the stance of this frozen moment in time. So we know about PTSD from veterans, right? People that served in the war, um, like decades ago, were coming back home and being totally like out of it, distraught, couldn't sleep, began to drink, like having nightmares, couldn't work, couldn't function, oftentimes did not do well in their family settings because they were so just like upset and overwhelmed and their nervous system really had shut down, um, or was like short wiring. Think about like a circuit breaker, all the breakers were being thrown at the same time. That can feel how PTSD feels sometimes. Well, we began to realize that complex PTSD comes in when we have that first original like shock trauma that happens. And trauma can be so many things. It can be a physical accident, like falling off of a roof and you hurt your back, and then like your life kind of begins to unravel. It could be like an injury, right? Um, Getting a concussion or having a car accident or having a child and the process being very traumatic, not what you planned for. God forbid, like you lose somebody, you lose that child, or someone passes away. If you have abuse in your history, physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, like mind control, um, emotional abuse kind of thing. So many things can be this initial trauma. Even as a child, right? Like, maybe you were a deeply feeling child, right? And you needed time and space and things to be a little bit slower, like, not go, go, go all the time, perfection is required, and you had a parent who did not see that, who did not get it, God bless them, and you were raised in a way that wasn't supportive for your nervous system. So that could have been a trauma, right? Oftentimes, we have financial trauma, we have cultural trauma. What we now know is that PTSD can be genetic. And so think about these atrocious things that have happened in our society: slavery, the Holocaust, the Great Depression, the war against women, and children, even. So we've had these cultural crises happen. Well, that energy doesn't just go away once the next generation is born. No, it's passed down. Research shows us that um, for like rodents that they did experimentation on, the same chemical response that the first set of animals had, right? So they tested it, they got the levels. 7 generations later, so 7 more generations of these animals had the same level of chemical response that that first generation had, even though it was 7 generations later. So that tells us even when our great, 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 great grandparents experienced any kind of injustice, harm, violence, violation, poverty, just cruelness, right? Toxic behavior. When they experienced any of that, it has passed down multiple generations. So even though we technically are not in the same physical situations that they were in, that energy, that adrenaline, that dysregulation is still in our nervous systems. So sometimes when we think about we're facing a situation like today, whether it's financial, with job, with career, in our parenting, maybe it's fear around something and you try to overcome that fear in multiple different ways and you still feel stuck around it, you still feel like you can't make progress. Some of that could very well mean it's not just your fear. It could be fear that has been in your family for generations around somebody 4 generations ago who tried to start a business and maybe did it, but then lost everything or never started it and regretted it. And they always felt like if I had done that, things would have been better. All of those thought patterns have energy and it's held in our DNA. It's called epigenetics. We may touch on that a bit, but I'll let you have, I'll give notes so you can look it up further if you want to as well. All of that is true when it comes to trauma. So, that being said, when we are dealing with post-traumatic stress in our own life. And here's the thing, in this capacity, I'm not your one-on-one therapist, so I can't diagnose you, but I can equip you with what to ask your professional about, how to find professionals to really help with this. There are some assessments and guides online that you can look at to see what are the baseline questions that could help me determine if I have this condition or not. What I can say is that two of the most like incorrect diagnosis for PTSD are two of the biggest symptoms of PTSD, which is anxiety and depression. Often people only will diagnose for or even treat for the depression and the anxiety and not realizing that those are two significant symptoms of PTSD, right? And complex PTSD comes in when we have like stressful things, traumatic things, and they become stacked. So maybe, for example, you guys lost your home as a kid, and after that, the family could never really recover. Maybe your parents got divorced, or one of them left or passed away. These are now multiple traumas that get stacked on top of each other, kind of like a Jenga game, if you remember that, where at some point they're all going to fall over. When that one block is stacked, that will be the tipping point and it can topple over. Oftentimes, that actual block that causes the um, toppling over of all of the blocks can be where we shift from PTSD to complex PTSD, where our nervous system cannot process the amount of traumas that are now stacked on top of each other. And because of that, it basically like it freezes. It freezes, it stalls out. Think about like a light bulb, like um shooting and the light goes out, like sparks fly, lights go out, can't turn it on or off. Our nervous system goes through similar process. However, the flip side to that is our nervous system can regenerate. It can heal given the right support, the right resources, the right tools, the right environments, the right meds, supplements, exercises, all of these different components lead into the nervous system being able to heal, as well as the brain. It's called neuroplasticity. When the brain actually regenerates itself, every part of our body does regenerate itself every 7 years based on the pattern that has been inputted in the last 7 years. And so it's okay if maybe the past 7 years haven't been great, that's okay. Starting now, you can begin to make different choices, build different habits, and that's what this next 7-year cycle will be built on. So all of that to say that complex PTSD and PTSD both have significant effects on how we live, and it's important to know that trauma itself, because it's all around us, when we've had trauma earlier in life, when we have new traumas, right? Oftentimes the new trauma can ignite the old trauma, right? So polyvagal theory talks to us about when we have an energetic charge in our body. So say we have a core wound around abandonment, right? From 20 years ago, 40 years ago. When a new situation comes up that matches that original abandonment feeling, it's like a magnet. So they latch to each other. So what you're feeling isn't just about the present day abandonment situation or feeling, it's matching with that old original abandonment feeling or reaction. And this often can create like an internal explosion, if you will. So often you'll see it where you or someone you know um, is reacting like in such a big way over something that in and of itself doesn't feel like that huge of a thing. When the reaction is always larger than the actual content, it tells us that there's typically something underneath it that's bigger than just what's happening in this moment. And so when we think about um, ways to look at PTSD and complex PTSD, we're really, in truth, talking about how do we address and tend to a traumatic brain injury. PTSD is truly um, a neurological injury, really equivalent to a traumatic brain injury. And what we know now is that this information has been around really since Freud, right? Some of his journals have been released that he basically kind of captured symptoms that we now know as trauma symptoms, but that information had been suppressed, um, and he couldn't publish it, right? What we know now is that trauma has um, a behavior, it has a language, and it has symptoms. And the more that we can learn what our symptoms are, especially like ours specifically, the people that we love, what their symptoms are, we can better address how to work with them to support ourselves and others in working through them, in resolving them, which is possible. And so when we think about common symptoms of PTSD, and I will drop these, we can talk more about these in the discussion group, but there's a certain number of symptoms that have to be present to receive an actual diagnosis for PTSD. Some of the most common symptoms are difficulty controlling emotions, feeling really reactive no matter how hard you're trying not to feel so reactive. Does that make sense? Um, when we think about feeling shame, so maybe you feel worthless or defeated, or you feel guilty about the trauma just in general, or about like where you are in your life, and maybe you feel where you are in your life is directly related to the trauma that happened. So, say you had a parent that left or passed away, say you grew up poor, and that really limited your choices as far as school and how you could gain more skills to get a better job, and you feel like because of that things just kind of went down this rabbit hole. These can be symptoms of like there was an initial trauma or traumas that have now created these effects, these symptoms that we deal with on a daily basis, and especially when we don't have the adequate tools to help us to kind of transmute these symptoms. Dissociation is another big one for PTSD and CPTSD. It's like you feel like you're in a dream or like you're not inside your body. It can feel like you're floating sometimes. It can also feel like time stops. So it can feel like you're in like a trance or like um days or hours are going by and you're still going through the motions for the most part, but you don't have a concept of time. So sometimes it can feel like it's been a few days when it's been weeks or months and sometimes even years. Dissociation really simply means we are leaving our body, we're leaving our current reality in the now to go someplace else, usually in our mind, that feels safer than being in the present moment with what's happening in the present moment. Dissociation is a beautiful coping mechanism that helps us when we're kids to survive different trauma that happens, whether it's parents who just talk in a not good way, maybe they're emotionally abusive, maybe they were just very strict, or someone you cared about just treated you in a way that wasn't right, that wasn't healthy, that wasn't loving. We learn to check out. So we learn to just block them out and go someplace else in our mind, right? The challenge is as we get older, as we step into adulthood, that that reflex of like checking out and going someplace else in our mind, it doesn't stop. Like we keep doing it. That's the problem. So it is brilliant to help us cope when we're kids, and as we get older, it begins to hold us back. It begins to help us to stay small and to hide, oftentimes from opportunities, from healthy relationships, from our own consistency and being able to get things done, right? And we'll go into this more. And I also have a course coming around some of this work too, that you may be interested in joining. But we have parts of us, parts of our psyche that kind of fragment, if you will, when trauma happens, and those parts can develop symptoms that help us cope, like I said. And in childhood and teens, it helps us cope to be safe, even to thrive, right? However, as we get older, we're no longer able um, to prevent the negative aspects of that same coping skill from happening. So dissociation is a big symptom of complex PTSD and PTSD. Some of the other symptoms, you can have physical symptoms of PTSD. We don't talk enough about the physical symptoms. It can be chronic headaches, dizziness. Many people who experience early trauma, so like birth to age 3, birth to age 5, typically are more prone to have chronic migraines, stomach issues, digestive issues, chronic pain, can be a symptom of trauma in your history. Chronic fatigue can be a symptom. Physical reactions when you are reminded of the trauma. So it might be sweating or anxiety, panic attack, racing heartbeat. Like you might feel faint and just very overwhelmed. All symptoms of trauma that's still active in your nervous system that's just needing some deeper tending to and healing. Um, there are issues in our relationships when we've had trauma. We can have a difficulty forming meaningful relationships. Communication can be a challenge, either breakdown in communication, or we're struggling to say what we mean in a way that feels fair and even effective. We can have difficulty trusting others, including ourselves. Can you grab my green water cup? It's somewhere around. Thank you, baby. Self-destructive patterns also can come into play. So self-harm, thoughts of suicide, suicidal thoughts, alcohol and drug use are also two big symptoms of PTSD. It's called self-medicating. We all know someone, right, who struggles with this. It is a symptom of trauma. This isn't the course for this, but just for so that you know, the gateway drug, right, of drugs is trauma, right? We thought that it was marijuana or cigarettes or alcohol, all these things. Trauma is the real gateway drug, to be honest. There's a green one somewhere, it's right there. Thank you, honey. So when we have drug abuse, alcohol abuse, it's important for us to think about what's the trauma that's gone on. Thank you so much. That really is um, at the root, right, of these behaviors that are problematic. Avoiding people, places, and things and feelings, avoidance is a big piece of it as well. And so people with complex PTSD, often these symptoms are just increased, like they're worse. They may feel more intense. They also might feel treatment resistant, so that whatever you're doing to try and support the symptoms, it can feel as though it's not working. This is often how we know it's complex PTSD. There's also hypervigilance that comes with complex PTSD that's even more significant than in PTSD. It's just being very, very aware of thoughts, of doubts, feeling jumpy, having difficulty relaxing no matter what you do. Sleep Sleep issues are a part of it as well as low self-esteem and negative self-concept or negative self-perception, where you feel like no matter how many times people say, like, "You're so gifted, you're so talented, you're so good at that, you're a good mom, you're good at what you do," um, you don't see it, like, you can't see it. And so some call this imposter syndrome, and it can be that as well, but oftentimes it's simply other people being able to say that you're good at something, you know they care about you, you know they mean it, like they wouldn't lie to you, but you can't receive it for the life of you. That's a telltale sign. It's a trauma somewhere that's impacted how you see yourself. And all is not lost. There are ways to overcome all of these symptoms and all of these patterns. All hope is not lost. But being aware of them helps us to be able to understand this is not just me maybe having negative thinking or being super emotional. This is also like something happening in my brain that I need some support with. Um, we've touched a bit on the window of tolerance. I will go deeper into that and signs of dysregulation, and ways to overcome them. Wanna be mindful of our time as well, but when you are in dysregulation, oftentimes you don't feel like yourself. You feel stuck and you're not sure how to, move through it. Oftentimes, you can feel like you can't move forward no matter what you do, and it can be very challenging. Um, Oftentimes we know what to do and we're unable to do it. That's one piece of it. The other piece is often that we are trying to make things better and we feel like we can't make any progress, like you're on this treadmill just to keep up, just to feel normal or like you're doing what you have to do just to survive, or thrive. Oftentimes we think, and I thought this, if we do all the right things, if we go to school and get the degree and get the job and have the family and work on our health, like if we get all these things going in a row together, then we'll be fine. Then we'll feel better. We'll have what we want. We'll have the life that we want, and all will be well. Many of us are finding we did all of those things and we still don't feel happy, don't feel fulfilled, don't feel stable, don't feel um, even like deeply connected to our own self. These are all symptoms really of trauma that none of the fancy things that we think will make it better actually makes it better if we still feel unworthy, undeserving, um, not valuable, right? So there's a disconnect between what's happening and how you feel about it. The truth of the life that you've created and how you're feeling about it. And oftentimes, people that create the life that they want when there's still a lot of unresolved trauma will sabotage it every time. And the other flip side to that is oftentimes when we have trauma that's unresolved, we struggle to create what we're wanting for so many reasons, out of fear of losing it, out of fear of it working, us not being able to handle it. All kinds of reasons go into that, and we'll go deeper into that. Those are just some overview of the symptoms and dysregulation and how that's actually going to look in your own life. And we're going to get to ways to kind of move through it. The last thing that we'll touch on for today is simply recognizing when you are feeling more safety in your body and when you're not. I know we've covered a lot for today. I'll drop some notes in our discussion group um, later today, a little bit of a recap. What I want you to take away from today is that yes, trauma is real. Yes, it's more complex than we realize. And there is hope. There are ways to move through all of the symptoms that we cover today. There are ways to increase your personal self awareness. There's ways to increase your ability to regulate no matter where you are, no matter where you're starting from. So if you feel like you're on this journey and you're brand new, there are ways to support yourself that we're going to go over. The first one being stopping for a moment each and every day and dropping into the present moment as best you can. Some of you might find it easy to drop into your body and to notice where you feel safe, to really bring in, imagine safety as a color, as an animal, or like a blanket, really coming and meeting you and offering this feeling of safety. And there might be other people that really cannot sense anything. They might not feel their body. They may not be able to feel what safety feels like. But when you think about it, be mindful that you're not overthinking it. To feel safety could be as simple as tuning into your breath, taking a breath, and realizing you're not doing anything right now in this moment that makes all of your organs work, right? You're not breathing even for yourself right now. The breath is happening in some ways on this divine level. We don't tell our hearts to beat. We don't tell our kidneys to work, right? I know some of us have significant health problems with any of those things, but if you're still alive today, right, there are some things working for you in your body, in your life that we can offer gratitude to, and that we also can say, if my body is working without me telling it to. If it knows what to do to keep me alive, to keep me, moving and blood flowing, right? I know I have this ability within me to remember how to recover, how to heal, how to become whole. You do. It's within you. It's already within you. This work is going to just help you um, remember it more vividly, and it's going to help you to give yourself permission to remember it and then to lock into it. It's like a treasure map that's been implanted on your soul. That's your blueprint for health. It's your ability to give yourself what you need, to ask for what you need, to allow what you need to come into your experience, even if you don't know how, even if you don't feel like you have the resources, time, money, energy, does not matter. If you decide that you want to heal, that you're ready to heal, or that ready or not, here I am. I'm choosing to make things better for myself, for my family, for anyone linked to me. When you decide that, you activate powers in the world, in heaven and in earth, that will get behind you and support your effort. I believe that with my whole heart. I believe it for you, I believe it for me, I believe it for all of us. It is law. It's not a fancy, sentence. It is spiritual law. And when that's the case, we cannot mess it up. We can't even mess it up for ourselves. And so please take that away. Also, take away the fact that when you are noticing just during your day, are you feeling closer to being in connection with yourself, or are you feeling more away? When you feel closer to yourself, being centered and grounded, you're automatically, that's a sign that you're in that window of safety for yourself. When you feel further away from yourself, more frazzled, more scattered, more just like lost, then you are further away from your center, from your knowing, and from your ability to tap back into safety. But that's okay. When you realize you're not in close enough proximity to your own safety, you can just drop back in, notice your breath, place a hand on your heart, one on your belly, and just breathe into the present moment. That will automatically bring you back into safety. It automatically brings you back into the present moment. And your power is always in the present moment. It's not in your past. It's not in your future. It's in right here, right now, where your feet are. Be where your feet are. That's the place where you will access safety, power, clarity, even if you don't feel it in this moment, the more that you do it, the more that you open up space for it to come, and the more that you normalize, it is safe for me to be safe. It's safe for me to feel safe, and it's safe for me to give myself permission to ground into that safety, knowing that I cannot mess it up, I cannot get it wrong, and that all is never lost, even when it feels like we're not doing it the way that we wanted to, it's not going as well or as perfectly as we had hoped. Doesn't matter. As long as you stay in the game, as long as you continue to drop back into safety, back into the power of this present moment, you will always be able to pivot no matter what life brings your way, no matter how much of a cluster it can feel like it is. It doesn't matter what things look like, it matters what they are. So when you can lean into this idea that I live by, everything is working out for you always, even when it looks like it's not. I trust that it is. I would love for you to take that away from today, that even when we've had trauma, even when we've had adversity and trials and tribulation, no one's going to get through this life without having trauma and adversity and tribulation. But the truth is, we can heal ourselves. We can partner with our higher power to create healing that is sustainable, and you have the power to give your own self permission to create the life, the business, the love that you are wanting. But it's going to require that we clean out and clean up some of these past stories and lies I feel from the devil around um, the fact that things don't have to feel okay in this moment to know they're going to be okay. And sometimes things being okay looks nothing like how we think it should look. And even with all of that, trauma does not get to have the last word on your life, on your results, on what you create for yourself. I love you so much. I'll be back tomorrow for day two. Classes will typically be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but because this week is just a different kind of week, we went live today. The Signal group is in the comment section. I'll link it here too, and I will also drop in the syllabus if you guys want a link for that, like a document link. I'll drop that in, and I will be here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. If you have questions, comments, feedback, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear about if you want more information on certain things I talked about, drop that in. If you love certain things, please drop that in. And I would love, love, love homework is for you to post one thing that you're taking away. It might be an aha moment, it might be something that you learned, or something that you do and you didn't even know that it was helpful or that it was a trauma response. If there's something that you really feel like a light bulb went off for me there, I'd love for you to post it in the comments below. I love you so much, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for being here. I'm so proud.